Welcome back to the Land Bulletin Podcast, where every other week we bring you experts in the field to impart their knowledge when it comes to the ranch and sporting property market, buying and selling advice, the latest best stewardship practices, as well as topics that impact landowners every day. I'm your host, Haley Murr. Let's jump in. All right, welcome back to the Land Bulletin Podcast. I'm Haley Murr, and today we're starting a new series called Voices of the West, and helping me out today kind of spur off this new series is our really good friend, Marissa Taylor. Welcome, Marissa, to the pod. Happy to have you on.
Thanks for having me. It's good to see you.
So good to see you too. So how's your day been? Let's start there. What are you guys doing up there on the ranch?
I think in our conversation before we started this, I said I'm 25 minutes behind all day. So, or maybe even all week. So it's a busy time of year. But I don't know if that's a great even point to narrow it to this time of year. So it's just sort of running these days. But this morning there's kind of a lot going on at the ranch. We've got some contractors doing some kind of winter prep work at looking at some winterizing some stock water tanks, and we have horses' teeth being floated, and we're moving livestock around, and we have a kiddo home from school today. So, all the things.
All those things, and on top of that, being a mom. So
Yeah.
You got a lot going on. I learn a lot from you every day, Miss Marissa. Well, I would love to talk about, before we go into what you're doing now with Wyoming stock growers, your work with conservation, that kind of thing. I'd love to learn about the Lonetree Ranch, what you guys are doing up there, how it might be different from other ranches that you know about, kind of, and, we could start with where it started and kind of what the goal was when you guys first bought the property.
My parents had a ranch in southern Colorado my whole life. And when my dad was ready to expand the ranch, they looked at expanding it regionally in southern Colorado, but couldn't find what they liked, and looked at a ranch in northeast Wyoming, which kind of opened up the state to them. And with kind of the list of stuff that they knew that they needed for production agriculture, we're able to find a ranch in southwest Wyoming, which is where the operations kind of headquarters now. And I think like all ranches, you try and that are agriculturally oriented, you're trying to match your agriculture production with the land resource base that you have. And so that's what we try to do, just like everybody else.
And so we met you through kind of your dad and my dad originally.
Yep.
And how long have you didn't just start at Lonetree. I know you're now working there and kind of running the show, but what led you to where your position is now and what you're doing with kind of Northways and that kind of thing?
I have 2 kids, and they were at my mom's house, and they found a Dr. Seuss book from the 80s. I'm sure anyone else that grew up in the 80s may be able to remember this book. And it was like a Dr. Seuss about you. And so it has like prompts you to rhyme about, what you want to do when you get older. I think I filled it out when I was 5, and on the like what you want to do when you get older piece, I had veterinarian, rancher, dog trainer, and artist, cook, I think. So like I think I've come full circle, and like I get to do all those things. I mean, I'm not a certified veterinarian, but there's plenty of vet work to be done. So like I think it turns out I'm coming for full circle, but I didn't have necessarily a direct path here. So I went to undergrad in California, and then I spent some time in Colorado skiing, and did a master's degree through University of Denver. And agriculture has always been interesting to me. So I kind of focused my studies in agriculture business, and then had an opportunity to work overseas doing some like land-based agriculture, which turned into working for Rio Tinto, which is a big mining company. And I came to the ranch after my parents had purchased the ranch in Wyoming and had been living here for a couple of years. I came for an extended visit and then just never left.
I mean, it's a beautiful spot. I understand why you decided to stay and raise your family there, and work the land. So it's really cool what you guys are doing up there. And I know, after knowing you and your family, conservation in addition to ranching has been a big part of your guys' life. Is there any conservation projects that you guys have implemented on the ranch to take you where you are today with Wyoming stock growers?
I don't think we're that different from all production agriculture ranchers that I know, and that a healthy ecosystem or healthy environment is what's good for your livestock, and it's also what's good for the wildlife. And so, in talking about conservation, I think what we mean by that is that the ecosystem's intact, or there's large areas of undeveloped landscape of which wildlife can move through, and that it's healthy for both our production, livestock, and then for the native wildlife. And so keeping or protecting those spaces is something that we value, but it's not uncommon for all ranchers, right? Because it's a requirement to do what you do for your business, and it benefits the wildlife. But it is a passion of mine in keeping these open spaces open. And I am on the board of the Wyoming Stock Growers Land Trust, and the mottos keep Wyoming, it's just open spaces. And conservation easements are a tool to do that. We don't have a conservation easement on our ranch, but it's a great tool for either ranchers or landowners that want to make sure that open space stays open, or give them an opportunity to either expand an operation or deal with an inheritance issue. So it's not a tool for everybody, but it is a great tool to support keeping those spaces undeveloped, those big stretches of landscape undeveloped. Yeah, so outside of the ranch, that part of the kind of the volunteer part of my life does revolve around conservation. And yeah, on the ranch, I think good production agriculture management really does support a robust ecosystem for wildlife. So, there's fences that are designed specifically to let wildlife migrate through easily. It's a project that we've taken on. And as we can, install fence or fix fence and make sure it's wildlife friendly. And then good grazing management. Yeah, make sure your land's healthy so that you can support all the other life that comes on it. And my dad's really, I think, again, not uncommon from other landowners or ranchers, and that water's a really important resource to us. And so maintaining the water infrastructure and understanding the way that the water moves through our property and then benefits all things from fish to moose and livestock is another area that we really look at.
And are there groups other than Wyoming stock growers that you guys, work with some of the planning that you're doing on your own ranch?
A few years ago, we did like an ecological planning day with all of the agencies or groups that are involved in a project on the ranch. And it was overwhelming, actually. We have great service agencies in the area, from the Farm Service Agency, FSA, or the NRCS. And then we also work with our federal lease partners through the Bureau of Land Management, BLM, the Forest Service, or state lands, Wyoming state lands. And then we've done a project with Audubon recently on some fencing and some sagebrush mowing to kind of open up the canopy, a sagebrush canopy for more grasses. I'm on the board, I said, is the Wyoming Stock Growers Land Trust, and then also Western Landowners Alliance. And so from a personal side, like a volunteer side, I spend time with those organizations, helping to support their missions.
That's huge. I mean, and with that, when you had the ecological study done, how do you kind of decide what priority these things, kind of take? I know some of it is like, as you affect this, it'll affect that. But when you do something as overreaching as an ecological study like you did, how did you kind of decide what to attack first? Was it based on funding or, the groups that you were working with, or was it based on like need of, sustaining the cattle and that kind of thing?
I think my answer might be luck. There is planning involved, and you have a priority list of like things that, just like in all things, like there's a list, and when something's at the top of the list because it's your highest priority, you kind of make it happen. And so there's for sure elements of what we're doing that hit that. And then there's also like timing and a little bit of luck. Like maybe there is funding for a project like that weed mowing project that you Audubon approached just with an opportunity to get that done. And that was not on our priority list, but it was an important project to be done. And then there's also kind of the collaboration. Like you asked me the agencies, I listed like 4. There's 40.
Yeah.
And so yeah, not intentionally leaving anyone off, because there's many agencies in Wyoming. I would say that Wyoming Natural Resource Trust Fund is one that's critical for all projects. We've worked with Trouts Unlimited for a number of projects, supporting some fish-friendly head gates, like head gates that fish can migrate through, on top of just like other diversions. And so the Wyoming Natural Resource Trust Fund helps fund projects that might be either engineered or designed or kind of spearheaded by another organization. And so, yeah, there are so many opportunities to do great work, which is part of like the answer to your original question. Is sometimes it is a priority of like something that just has to get done because we've either noticed or erosion, like you just can't avoid something like, oh, it's going to erode out a bridge, it's time to do that project, like or the stars align for a project with Trust Unlimited and the funding's available and it was on the list. So yeah, it feels a little more like a shotgun than a rifle.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of like if people approach you, it's one way. If it's a need, it's another.
Yeah.
And I'm just overwhelmed even with the 5 that you mentioned. I mean, how did you learn how to reach out to these people when you needed them? Was it through, the network of ranches with WLA and, the community that you're in, that you learned about, some of the tricks of the trade, or just time of being in this environment?
I don't know. I'm gonna have to think about that. I think my dad's like a real natural collaborator. He's like a real inviting person, and so he invites people to the ranch often. So sometimes I'm just keeping up with things that he's committed us to do, like like following through. Like, yep, okay, yes, we're doing this because he initiated it and said yes, and so
Yep.
we're doing it. And then I will say there's a bit of a learning curve in being able to stay up or stay on top of the opportunities that a landowner might have through some of these agencies. Some agencies are great at reaching out with and helping educate on the priorities or the opportunities that may be there. And then in other places, ranchers have to or landowners have to advocate for themselves within these agencies. So we have a really great conservation district in our area. So the Uinta County Conservation District can help navigate some of that. Like, hey, there may be, if you have this need, here's an opportunity to either find funding or to support the like technical services on that. So there are definitely different places to look or to go to help with that. But all of the things between the networking I do outside of the ranch to the networking that my dad does with all of our kind of local service providers or agencies. And then, word of mouth on stuff that's worked well for our neighbors or stuff that I may have heard, through one of those board service opportunities. But I think the opportunity is there. The barrier is figuring out the channel to go through.
Right. And I think that's a lot of, people who are purchasing properties. They go into it because this is a really good investment, or they're trying to, put their money somewhere, or they just want to recreate on the property. But it's super important when you buy these properties to understand that there are all these tools at your disposal, and figuring out the right people to talk to and how to manage the ranch the right way to reach your goals. And I know you know a lot about that with your work with Northways, and figuring out, the best path forward with owning a property, because sometimes people just don't know where to start.
It can definitely be tricky. I think, like, I'm sure you guys see this in the real estate side, that every property has an unfair advantage. Like there's something about that property that makes it a really incredible elk hunting experience or fishery or cattle production, or even within cattle production, maybe a specific, sort of enterprise or class of cattle that would be suited for that really arid environment or really lush environment or really high mountain environment. And so I can imagine coming in blind that, yeah, figuring out what that property's unfair advantage is, or the thing that it's the easiest to be, can be challenging, because I think we have a tendency to make our world around us fit what we want it to be. And so, yeah, it's definitely easier to not fight with Mother Nature. Like where you can work in sync, it's a she'll still humble you plenty, but where you can work in sync, it's a little easier. And so, yeah, identifying like is you want it to be a great mule deer property, but you're not in a mule deer corridor or anywhere where mule go, like it's going to be a tough sell, or tough
Right.
find, or I think one thing I can say about our place is that we would really love for this to be an incredible fishery. And we've done so much work to try and help support what could be a fishery, but ultimately we don't have the flows for to support like what we want it to be. So like our unfair advantage isn't an incredible fishery on our place. Like we have great water, but not a great fishery. And so, yeah, finding out what that, discovering and learning about what the property, the unfair advantage that property has, can be hard. I would say, for landowners that are looking for resources, they are out there. The Farm Service Agency, so the FSA, is a great place to start. The NRCS is another place to start, because they likely have data going like it predates either that particular ownership or multiple ownerships. And then anytime there's a local conservation district, it's like another really great place to start with resources. And then I would say engage in like Western Landowners Alliance can be a really great resource for anyone across the West that's looking for answers from a really wide gamut of questions, from like predator engagement with wolves and grizzlies, all the way to public access issues is another really big thing we're tackling right now, or not, I just say tackling, but
Well, Wyoming specifically, there's a
yeah,
lot going on with that. We don't have to go into a lot of detail, but with, when things like that on a statewide scale happen, it's good to have a lot of ranchers who are going through a similar thing to figure out a solution to
yeah,
handle some of those decisions that are made.
yeah.
But I know Wyoming tends to be a little bit more understanding of, the ranchers. Like some of these decisions that are made do take that into account. Have you found that? I know you said you had a Colorado ranch and now you guys are in Wyoming. Is there a bit of a difference even there with how things are handled?
I'm sure. I think my dad would probably be better to answer that, because I wasn't involved in I probably wasn't privy to the conversations as a young adult that I am kind of now, from the Colorado ranch to here. And the times have changed. So I think when we
Right.
had the Colorado ranch, Colorado was still really pro agriculture and a state that was easy to do business in. And Wyoming continues to be a state that prioritizes agriculture in our legislative process. And we have senators and representatives that recognize the role agriculture plays in each of our rural communities and across the state. And so, therefore, have favorable conditions to operate, or continue to have favorable conditions to operate. We can for sure see a difference when we look west-wide on, like we could take the public access issue, for example. Like New Mexico's recently had a ruling that's changed public access to water, and I'm in no way a expert on this issue, but I can recognize that when you aren't living in these places, or when you aren't and haven't done the work to maintain these ecosystems, it kind of just looks like that's how it was supposed to be. Like that's just natural. Like it's, you might not You might not be able to observe the amount of work it took to restore, say, that creek into a fishery, and like how delicate it is to keep it a fishery. And so I'm not sure that I think Wyoming's been able to maintain that connection and understanding, and so our legislative process supports that. I think as we get more urban development or less rural or more urban rural divide, that kind of communicating those nuances that really make a difference in achieving the conservation that we all are want, like that goal is probably likely not far apart, right? How we get there, it feels like is getting further and further apart.
But it's just interesting for people to know. I mean, when you were buying a property and when you're running a property, you need to know what these, what's happening out there. I mean,
Yeah.
it's so important to really understand, okay, I'm looking in Wyoming, I'm looking in this specific conservation, space. These are all the resources available to me. This is what I need to be wary of. I mean, it's huge. And I feel like you guys have probably just over the years, that's, you learn something new every day as you're
Well,
running your ranch.
yeah, there's no, and I do think we will all continue to face challenges as decisions about our public lands are made very far away from where they live. And being able to have, the foresters who are working in the forest help make decisions about the forest, that's like where the best decisions are going to be made about the forest, and where the people that are using those landscapes for timber or agriculture or recreation, and we have historically had those processes in place but are seeing tendencies for those decisions to be made quickly and far away. And I think that's a risk for us all, and I think that would be something really hard to know is happening if you weren't living like the consequences of it.
I would agree. And I think, even we're dealing with some stuff up at the monastery up near Aspen, and there's a lot of decisions. They have these caucuses up there that kind of reign supreme when it comes to zoning and regulations and all these things. And we're just seeing how impactful it is to have people on the ground locally making these decisions because it impacts them, instead of having these kind of statewide decisions made.
There's good and bad applications, right, of lots of things, of
And
grazing, of oil and gas production, of wolf introduction, so it's a little bit less of like right or wrong in like industry, right? Because there's nuance across all of it, and more
right.
in looking at how are we going to continue to preserve these open spaces, and not in not so much in like preservation as in like isolation and no use, but more in conservation of maintaining the maximum biodiversity and opportunity across these landscapes.
Right. No, it's sustained. It's a way to sustain kind of this industry and, ranching, but also, I mean, you're even working on these migratory corridor project
Yeah.
for, mule deer and up in Wyoming. Like it's all connected. And I think if the constituents and people making decisions were aware of, how these are all kind of connected, I think, a lot of better decisions would be made because,
Yeah.
I mean, to go from, I love, how our conversation has gone from, ranching family up in Wyoming to conservation to migratory corridors for animals. I mean, it's all connected.
Yeah.
And private landscapes are such an integral part into those things being connected,
Yeah.
which I think is huge.
I think if we were going to evaluate, like if we had to boil it down to one evaluation criteria for health, right, of a space or an ecosystem, it would be like biodiversity. So how many different things is that space supporting? And that then kind of goes the gamut, right? Like if you're trying to support a connection for recreation, mule deer migration, and robust herds, sage grouse, all the plant life required to support all of those species, the water systems, biodiversity for me is optimizing and maximizing biodiversity on a space, I think, is a great indicator in how we're evaluating these other decisions, whether it's how we're going to use public space and the health of your deeded land. That's one. I would say in connectivity, the Wyoming Migration Initiative is like such a cool organization and has been able to help all of us visualize what connectivity looks like why it matters that the deer that summer in Teton County need to also be able to get to just north of Rock Springs for their winter feed or winter grounds, and how come the rancher that lives in outside of Pinedale is supporting like a really critical key stopover, as is the rancher in Farson, or a tourist going to Teton County could see, that whole path that they maybe drove is connected for certain species. And I just think the visualization of that's kind of also changed how we think about these ecosystems. It's not just little or it's expanded the idea of it for me anyway.
Yeah, I think that's huge. And I think, what you've said with the goal of your guys' ranch, I know you've changed things around, you've started things and maybe they didn't work and, tried something else. But at the end goal has always been to sustain the biodiversity of the landscape that you guys work on, that you love, and understanding that that landscape spans, it's not just the property you own, it's everything within the state. And it's just really cool to see what you guys have done at Lonetree. But I know it's always an ever-changing kind of story of, what's important and where you're headed. But it's just been really great to know you and your family over the years of learning the resources that are available, understanding the importance of community, not just in Wyoming, but the West. So I just appreciate you taking the time today and kind of going through what you guys, Lonetree might be its own little ranch that your family kind of has loved and will love for generations, but to understand kind of as a landowner, things are ever changing, and it's just important to know what's out there and available to you. So I appreciate you, Marissa, and what your family's doing out there.
Well, thanks for having me. It's good to see you.
Yeah, of course. Good to see you too. I hope we can have another kind of reunion coming up here.
That'd be great.
Maybe before the winter. Thanks for joining us today. To learn more about the ranch real estate market or our ranch marketing process, make sure to subscribe to our newsletter on our website at merranchgroup.com or give us a call at 303-623-4545. See you next time.